Today's topic should be a lot of fun. This is something that we talk about constantly with our potential prospects, with other people in the industry. And it is just, what is sales enablement, and where do you even begin wrapping your head around the processes, the technology, how you build a plan within your organization. So we're going to have a lot of fun talking about that. And we're going to keep it, as the topic implies, pretty basic. We're going to take a beginner's approach, but through really good resources that go much deeper into all of these points. So once this session actually wraps up, we will send you out an on-demand link to watch this webinar on demand. And in that link on the landing page, we're going to include just a ton of resources. So we're going to have ebooks for you. We're going to have links to other articles. We're going to have links to other podcasts and other on-demand webinars you can watch. So consider this the tip of the iceberg. And if you want to continue to go deeper, you can certainly do that in the on-demand webinar. So just to kick off, my name is Dave Karr. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Klyck.io. We are a sales enablement software company that operates in the B2B space. And with me today, I have Paul Tkach, who is our Director of Business Development. And Paul is a sales enablement guru, is a partner in crime. And so we're going to go through together and talk about what is sales enablement and how can you begin business. So with that, let me go ahead and screen share here. And all right, Paul, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen?
Yep. Looks good. So you can see it.
Excellent. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to take this at a pretty beginner level. We want to keep housekeeping rules as we go. If you've got questions, there's two ways to ask. You can either go into the Q&A section and propose a question there. You can raise your hand. You can use the chat. Any of those are fine. Paul will monitor those, and we can either answer your questions back in text, or Paul can throw them over to me and we'll answer them live as we go. So before we hop in the topic, I'll just tell you a really quick snippet about us. As I mentioned, we are a sales enablement technology platform. We focus primarily in B2B sales, and our goal is to help B2B sales and build better relationships with their clients. And we do that by taking your marketing and sales content and turning that into conversations you can have with your clients and your prospects. We take all the data that we collect from our system and we turn that into direction you can use to run your business. And we take your sales reps and give them the tools they need to be sales experts. So throughout this conversation, we'll talk just generally about sales enablement. We're not going to make this about Klyck, but we're just going to talk about some good old-fashioned concepts of sales enablement, how you can apply it. And before we get there, one thing I always like to do when we're starting at the basics is talk about why we need sales enablement. Because until you really understand that question, it's difficult to understand how to apply sales enablement and understanding where it fits in your organization. So what is causing the need for sales enablement? Well, first and foremost, the environment is completely different now, especially post-COVID. So we have changed in B2B more in the past 2 years than we have in the past 2 decades. And just some statistics that outline how the buyer journey is changing. We now see buyers looking at and engaging with at least 5 high-value pieces of content before they get to the point that they want to make a purchase. And what do we mean by high-value content? That means videos that are created by your sales and marketing team, ebooks, website landing pages, conferences, on-demand webinars, podcasts. There is such a wide variety of content. Rolling right into the second point, which is that 70% of that buying process is now completed before a prospect ever engages with your sales team. That's where content lives, right? So content marketing, content strategy is really now the bulk of the early stage buyer experience. And throughout that entire journey, buyers want to continue to consume and receive content to help lead them down their purchasing path. One other really interesting statistic, if you look, which are only getting larger, by the way, and if you're in B2B, you already know that, 73% of those buying committees are now made up of millennials. So we all know that millennials buy very differently. They have a very different journey that it's very digital. It's very engaged with content. It's very engaged with self-service research. So that is another thing driving the need for content and for managing that content all the way down to sales with sales enablement. And then finally, 75% of marketing content that's created goes completely unused by your sales team. Now, as a marketing leader, that's a very difficult statistic to swallow, right? Because we always want to think that our content is being used by all the sales team and it's making a really big impact. But in actuality, it's a big challenge because although it's being consumed on the early stage of the buying cycle, there's a huge breakdown between the content that's being consumed in the first few steps of the funnel steps with sales, which arguably is the most important place you want to use content because that's where you close deals. Another couple of stats here, sales and marketing alignment is something that's extremely important in B2B now. And when we talk about sales enablement and what it is, one of the primary functions it serves is to better align those two teams. So bringing sales and marketing together. Well, what happens when you do that? 32% higher revenue is realized by firms with good sales and marketing alignment versus firms without. So immediately out of the gate, we understand that there's a massive financial impact of bringing those teams together, especially in the new environment. You also see 38% higher win rates on your sales pipeline when sales and marketing are collaborating and working collectively to drive sales. Much faster growth, so 27% faster revenue growth for firms with really good alignment. And then finally, the customer retention. So 36% higher customer retention when you have sales and marketing aligned. And this really goes into a whole nother conversation around customer success. How do you continue to nurture a customer once you've converted them? But marketing plays a huge piece in that and empowering sales to continue to keep those relationships in place. So now that we've talked about why you need sales enablement, let's get into the meat of what is sales enablement? What does it do? How does it work inside of your organization? So these are some results from a recent HubSpot survey. And the simple question was, how do you view the primary function of sales enablement within an organization? So the answers are a little all over the place, and we'll talk through these individually, and then we'll talk about why that is. But 61% of respondents said that sales enablement should develop sales strategies for the business. 50% said, hey, that should create materials, content, assets. 42% said it needs to be about sales training. 41% says that it performs analysis, so looking at data and interpreting that on how to take action. And then 36% was finding cross-selling opportunities within a sales organization. So if you're in a big B2B company and you have a matrix organization, you'll understand why that's important. So here's the catch on all this. Sales enablement is all of these things. It touches everything on this list and more. And so what we really view sales enablement as a function is a way that you can empower your sales team to close more deals and build better relationships with their clients by using systems and processes to make their job easier. So as we continue to go through the presentation, we'll talk about how it can do that. But the first big thing to think about as you consider sales enablement and what it is that sales enablement really has two sides of the coin. There is the operational process side of sales enablement, which that is going to involve the strategy that you create, the playbooks that you create, how you build your team, how do you structure them, what sort of resource do you put in place to manage sales enablement, and then finally, how you're using all the metrics to track and hold accountability for that internal process in the company. So this right here, I'm going to take a pause and really spend some time on this because this is the number one thing that we see potential customers confused about. So often people think about sales enablement simply as a technology package, which it is. Having sales enablement software and technology is extremely important, but everything starts with the process. So if you're not building that operational structure inside of your company to manage and execute on sales enablement, having a piece of software really is not going to do very much for you, right? It's kind of like, buying an exercise machine and leaving it in the corner. It's not going to do any good unless you have a plan to get on it and use it and work with it. It only works if you work. So that's the first thing I always like to cover is when we're thinking about what is sales enablement, The operational process is something you really have to focus on. Now, the software aspect of it is where things get pretty fun, because that's where you start talking about platforms. There's so many good ones out on the market. Of course, we feel really well about ours and how we fit in the B2B space. But those platforms are really what bring sales enablement to life for the users. And in most cases, it's not just about the individual software, it's about how it fits into the ecosystem of other software you're already using. So for instance, CRM integrations are one of the most important things we see being tied into sales enablement, because when you marry those two systems up, the combination is actually greater than the sum of the individual parts. We'll talk more about that later, but that is a huge piece. Sales enablement systems at the core are designed to resources and training to sales reps. So if you've not ever seen a sales enablement system, you can take a look at some of our videos on our website. We've got some short 90-second videos that actually show you what ours looks like. A lot of other ones out there have videos as well. But essentially, it's a repository where you can keep sales and marketing content, and that content is delivered to salespeople based on either inputs they make into the system. So they may say, hey, I'm going to call on an oil and gas company. I'm meeting with someone in operations. They're at, the awareness stage of the buying cycle. And then based on all those criteria, the system will recommend to that salesperson what kind of content they should use to prepare, what kind of content they should present to that prospect in the meeting, and then what kind of content they should share with them to use after the meeting is over to continue to nurture that cycle. So that's pretty much sales enablement systems in a nutshell. They also have reporting and analytics built in. So there's a lot of opportunities to collect data about what is being used by your sales team, how it's being engaged by your customers. So how well are they staying engaged in those presentations? How long are those presentations taking when the sales reps are giving the presentations? And then most importantly, how are prospects and customers engaging with content that's shared? So systems like ours have the ability to tell you how many times that customer opened the email, what they looked at in terms of the content, how long they looked at it, how many times they came back and looked at it. And so all those data insights are extremely important to help your sales team understand how to navigate a deal. And it's also very important to your sales and marketing leadership to understand what sort of engagement is there and how to rank that in propensity to buy, right? So if you see much higher engagement, the probability that you're going to convert those deals is much higher. So it allows you to make better strategic decisions. So before I go into the three main functions of sales enablement, I know we've covered a good bit even in those first few slides. Is there any questions we have at this point? Paul, I don't know if you've seen anything come in the chat.
No questions right now. I think that you covered a good one between that. That's always one that we have, is a big difference between sales enablement as a function and sales enablement as a software and a platform. So I think that was a really good answer to that.
Okay, great. So we'll continue to move on. So the next thing we want to talk about is really the three main functions of sales enablement. When you start to think about, okay, what is sales enablement? How does that break down? Number one, it's about digital content management. And content can mean a lot of different things. It can mean marketing content and collateral that's created. It can mean sales content. It can mean playbooks that your sales team use for strategy. It can be buyer personas. It can be training content. So most sales enablement systems can deliver learning and development content inside of the application to help prepare salespeople before a sales call or before a certain opportunity is going to take place. So there's a wide variety of content that you can put into a sales enablement system. And again, back to the process versus the technology, there's both sides of that coin. So you have to think about how you're creating that content, how you want to organize that content, and then the software allows you to execute and make that content come to life through the sales process. The next piece is multi-channel engagement, and this will probably make more sense once we get into it. But multi-channel engagement is basically the new life cycle or customer buying pattern for B2B clients. And it's multi-channel because, again, they're doing a lot of their own research. They're engaging with salespeople one-on-one. They're looking at your website. They're consuming your content. They're having meetings and presentations. So a good sales enablement system should be able to empower your salespeople to manage all of that multi-channel engagement that they're having with their prospects and their customers. So we'll talk more about that as we get into that section. And then finally, closed loop analytics. So the data that you get from sales enablement arguably is one of the most important factors. It is what is going to help you make better decisions in your business and ultimately lead better outcomes based on how you can recommend actions to salespeople, and then also how you can view your pipeline from a much higher executive level. So we'll start out with number one. We're going to talk about how you manage content and how that works both operationally and then in the system. So first and foremost, when you look at the statistics on how salespeople spend their time, nearly 40% of all B2B sales reps spend time, 40% of their week preparing for meetings. Now, that shouldn't come as a shock. I know from my previous experience in large B2B firms, we've known that for years. Everyone's always trying to figure out, how do you keep your salespeople more engaged in being out in the field versus being in the office? But 40% is a massive number. And when you break that down and look at a weekly time expenditure, you're talking about as much as 3 hours spent just searching for content to either build in a presentation or share with a client, as much as 8 hours searching for customer information. So combing through your CRM system, looking through old email records, whatever the case may be. And then 4 hours just creating presentations. So, hey, I've got a meeting with XYZ company and I've got to try to put together my own PowerPoint. That comes with its own set of problems because salespeople as a whole are not necessarily always the best to create presentations, especially as a marketer. I can say that. I mean, we always worry about branding, keeping things on brand, messaging. So, the ability to empower your sales team with pre-made presentations or presentations that can be customized and built on the fly, like you can do with sales enablement, is a huge way to reduce all this wasted time. So one of the things that you're going to look at when you're thinking about sales enablement is how can you reduce that prep time? Now, some research that we've done even with our own clients show that our system has helped reduce prep time by up to 70%. So we do that by intelligently delivering content. Our system works very similar to other systems in that we use filters and tags. Connecting your system to a CRM is one of the most important things you can do if you have the ability to do it within your CRM. Salesforce.com, of course, is the industry leader. We connect with it. Most of the other great sales enablement platforms connect with it. But by integrating those two, you can now start pulling data from CRM to help inform and make the sales enablement system work better. So again, like that example I gave earlier, sales reps going to call on an oil and gas customer. They're meeting with someone in operations. They're at the awareness stage of the buying cycle. The CRM knows this. It can empower the sales enablement system to say, hey, here's the criteria. We need you to recommend and serve up content that fits that need. And the sales enablement system does the rest. So that's a huge, huge way to save time for salespeople. Pre-made presentations are a part of that, giving them templates, and also the power to mix and match, right? So one of the things that our system does, we allow people to build their own presentations around those criteria. So once they see all the available content or available resources they can use for any of those engagements, they can mix and match. So it still gives salespeople the power to have control, but you can do that in a matter of seconds versus a matter of hours. Training, we talked about that as well. It really helps to deliver training content or learning content ahead of a meeting, or again, to review things like buyer personas or battle cards. Just makes the whole process easier. And then the data analytics from the system that can be used to help better inform those content suggestions. So all those are really important things that a sales enablement system does to help deliver that content and make it more effective for your salespeople. So any questions on that before we move on to section 2?
Yeah, we do have a question here, Dave. And the question is, what teams do you see using sales enablement the most? I think by that, I think they're probably talking about internally at companies. And I think the obvious answer there is sales, but I think there's a lot of use cases for other teams that we see as well. And you can elaborate on this too, but not only do we see sales using platforms quite a bit to save time and use the right content, but we also see customer success teams using it to engage their customers, have the right content at the right time. And marketing as well. It's important for marketing as well to use quite often too, so they can keep up to date with understanding of what content is being used and is going out there, and what content is actually being used in meetings and presented to customers. Not sure if there's anything you want to elaborate on that, Dave.
Yeah, no, I think you said it well, Paul. And I think that the big surprise for a lot of people, especially on the sales side of the team, is just how important it can be for marketing. And again, I can say from a marketing perspective, one of my prior roles, I ran marketing for a large electrical distributor, and we had a sales enablement system we used alongside Salesforce.com, and also a marketing automation system. We used Pardot. But within that, sales enablement became extremely important for us because it allowed my marketing team to understand what was happening in the field. So as marketers, we always kind of have these blinders on around, what we're doing at the top of the funnel, but it's hard to see the bottom. Sales enablement allows you to go in and look at all that data. So you can say, okay, hey, I'm going to build a marketing campaign, let's say around a new product, but we want to understand what conversations have actually happened in the field from salespeople to their prospects about that product. Easy. Go in the sales enablement system, you pull the data, you understand where to target, and then you can make your marketing activities more informed based on that. It also gives you a great way to actually put ROI to your content. So, most marketers, if you really ask them point blank, like, what is your ROI you're getting on content, the number's superficial. But with sales enablement, you can actually start assigning that to deals. So you can look and say, okay, well, hey, of the, whatever 100 deals we closed this month, what content was shared along the way, and how do we see correlation between those really good sales meetings, the presentations, the follow-ups versus conversion. And now you start to have an idea of, oh, well, hey, we spent, $10,000 creating all this content and videos. Here's the return we got because we can associate that with closed deals. So that's a really important use case. But on a much broader, when you just said, hey, what kind of teams in general, B2B is just such a good opportunity for sales enablement. And, there's a lot of different industries that have adopted it. I think tech has probably gotten there faster than most, not as a surprise because they tend to be leaders. But I think B2B in general is really awakening to how important sales enablement is, because the sales cycles are getting so much longer and are becoming so much more digital now, especially post-COVID. So I would say that complex B2B businesses are the most ripe to see the benefits of those solutions.
And another point to that too, just to add on, is that the stat we brought up, about 70% of that buyer journey is completely done by them, right? And so that's an alarming stat for anybody in sales who doesn't have access to that front part, right? You're not educating your prospects or your customers from the beginning now. You are letting them do the work, and then you're joining that conversation when it's almost done. So it's important, really important for B2B sales cycle.
Yeah, could not agree more. All right. Any other questions we had?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So we'll move on to multi-channel engagement. And so again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but just to rehash on that, multi-channel engagement basically means, how do you manage all those touch points with prospects, the ones that happen both indirectly and directly. So you can, again, think about the total buyer journey from the time that they maybe look something up on Google, they find your website, they read an article, maybe they download an ebook, or they look at some solutions you have. They may read a testimonial. So they may Google reviews about your company or reviews about your product. So all those things going on ahead of the sales engagement. Well, then when buyers actually engage with a salesperson, they want to continue that. So they want to continue having content that leads them through that cycle. Won't get into all the details here, but in a lot of our other content and podcasts that we've done, we talk about how to create different types of content for the different stages of the buying cycle. So there's a real difference in creating content at the awareness stage versus content at consideration or decision. And as you get down that funnel, what you want to do is have your sales enablement system allow salespeople to pick right up where the buyer left off on their own journey and continue to use content to nurture them through that cycle. And that becomes multi-channel because that may be an in-person meeting. So the salesperson may actually go out to their facility, sit down face-to-face, use a sales enablement system to present. That may be digital. So they may be meeting on a conference call, a web conference call, just like we're using today with Zoom. It could be in a webinar. It could be not direct at all. It could be simply an email request coming from a client or a response coming from a salesperson where they want to use content to reinforce a point. So it may be, hey, oil and gas company, XYZ, I know you asked about these solutions. Here's some information on that. And you attach your brochures and your videos. But maybe you also want to include a customer testimonial. So, hey, by the way, here's a company that looks just like yours. Here's one way that we created a solution, and here's the outcome. Here's how we were able to save them money or make some business impact for them as an organization. So sales enablement helps you do that, right? You can continue to nurture that prospect with content all the way through the cycle, ultimately to close. We talked about virtual selling again, post-COVID, and I'm trying to remember the stat. It was from Aberdeen. It was something like pre-pandemic, 75% of all executives said that, virtual was becoming a thing. Virtual selling was becoming a thing. Post-pandemic, it's almost 90%. It's like 87% of senior executives in sales and marketing say virtual is not only a thing, but it's here to stay. It's not going to change. We're going to see much more of that type of engagement. Trade shows. So if you've engaged at all in trade shows in the past 2 years, you know how dramatically they've changed. So that puts a whole new dynamic. But virtual selling is really going to have a totally new meaning in B2B, and sales enablement is a perfect fit for that. Again, because it is digital by nature, it allows you to engage with clients much better digitally than you can without a system. So it gives you more of an in-person feel. So how does sales enablement help facilitate that type of selling? First and foremost, I mentioned video conferences. So if you're leading virtual presentations, it helps. But one way that's not as often discussed is just two-way collaboration. So I'll give you an example. Inside of our system, we actually have something called co-browsing built in. And what that actually allows the salesperson to do is to send their prospect a link, and they can do this by text, on a mobile phone, email, however they want to deliver a link. When the customer opens it up, they then can begin presenting on their screen and controlling their screen. So this is really, really cool if you have a product that requires field service. So as an example, in my old world, I used to be in the electrical distribution space. A lot of times we would sell a piece of equipment and someone would be trying to start it up and they would hit a roadblock. They would say, man, I can't program this PLC, or I got to set up the circuit breaker a proper way. So imagine your salesperson being able to send a link, open their screen, even on their phone while they're in the field, and then walk them through a service manual, and then allow the prospect to take control of their screen and scroll down, draw pictures, talk about certain pieces of the document. It's just a much, much more engaging way that you can interact with people versus just saying, okay, hey, I'm going to email you, a user document or a startup document. It just facilitates much more collaboration. It also allows sharing of content throughout the entire cycle. So you can share content ahead of a meeting. You can use sales enablement to share content at the meeting, in between, and then as a follow-up. And through all of that, again, you're collecting data. The system is understanding how your customer is responding to those email shares and those documents. Are they viewing them multiple times? Are they forwarding them on to someone else in their organization? All those metrics can begin to paint that picture for your sales team. Another thing that we have to think about from a multi-channel standpoint is just being able to work on all devices. So whatever sales enablement system you're looking at, I would encourage you to make sure it runs on mobile tablets, mobile phones, laptops, Microsoft Surface, all of those things, because in this multi-channel world, you never know how somebody's going to be engaging or using it in the field. And then finally, the intelligent recommendations inside of the sales enablement system can allow you to understand what content you should share at those touch points based on historical data. So any questions on multi-channel before we get close to wrapping up here on our next point?
No questions in Q&A right now.
Okay, great. So our final point here, so closed loop analytics. This is actually for somebody like me. I'm a data nerd. I love looking at analytics and data. This is one of my most fun pieces of sales enablement, I think. And the reason that is because it allows you to really take those KPIs and bring them to life and understand how all of these strategies are starting to play out with real results. So first of all, let's look at a statistic that's pretty alarming to me, which is just that 41% of all sales and marketing executives feel like that they lack insight on what campaigns are actually effective. So that could be sales campaigns, marketing campaigns. They just don't feel like that they have enough information to determine what's really going on in the field. Well, with analytics and sales enablement, you can get a much better window into what's actually happening down at the field level. So how can that help in terms of giving you more insight into your funnel? Giving your sales reps in the field better visibility to how their prospects are engaging is a game changer. And I'll give you a great example. So for years, sales reps have had meetings, they've sent follow-ups, they've sent proposals, and you never really know how your customer reacted to that, how much time they spent with that. Proposals are a huge piece of this. And again, going back to my old world, I remember our sales team would very frequently deliver sales proposals to clients. And you always wonder, did they really read it, or did they just flip to the price to just figure out what your number was and then maybe, check that with your competitor? Well, with sales enablement, you can know. So if you build a proposal and you send it through sales enablement, you have visibility. So if that customer shows one open and they only looked at it for 10 seconds, you can pretty much guarantee that they only flipped to your price to look at that and they didn't read over your proposal. So all of these data points begin to give your people in the field, on the ground, insights into exactly what's happening. So as a sales rep, that's a very empowering feeling. And you can understand when you might need to make that next sales call. How do you need to approach that next sales meeting? Is there intent there? Maybe you've got a buyer that you thought was really engaged, but there's absolutely zero engagement. Do you even have to spend time with that buyer, right? Like, you've got to focus on what is going to drive the most outcome. Why would you waste your time with a dead opportunity that shows no engagement if you have 3 other opportunities that show very high engagement? So again, using that data to understand how to engage in the field is a really, really powerful thing. Using content at the right time, again, is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. And the data that comes back through sales enablement can ensure that that is done correctly. So first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, you can look at that at a macro level to start understanding correlation between content. Hey, what content helps move deals forward? What content typically works best when you're talking about a certain solution or certain product set? So all of that data can help inform the system to work better. But again, when you're connecting it to CRM, all of that goes to the next level, because now not only are you looking at the data available in your sales enablement system is pulling data from your CRM, and together they can ensure that you're having a very, very curated experience for your customer versus something that is going to be led from a salesperson guessing. What should I do next? I think I should do that, or I hope this works. Hope is not a strategy. So with data, you can guide that much better through sales enablement. Reporting sales activities, and this is another big one for executives especially. You hate to make anything sound like Big Brother, but with your sales enablement systems, you can get a much, much better insight into what's actually happening in their customer meetings. So with most sales enablement systems, you can track how many meetings have occurred, how many presentations have been built by a certain sales rep, when were they shared, what type of engagement happened after the presentation or the meeting, did they follow up? So if you're looking for a better way to set expectations and hold accountability for your sales team, sales enablement can be a great way to do that, because you have visibility not only to how the customers are reacting to that content or engaging with content, but how salespeople are using it. So it's a very quick way to figure out if your salespeople may have some deficiencies. Do they need to have some development or coaching or redirection based on how those data insights are coming in? Did you have a question, Paul? Was there a question that came in?
No, not right now. No.
Okay, sorry. I saw you moving your
My hand popped up. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't have a question. So finally here, marketing as well. We talked about ROI earlier. So if you're a marketer like me, understanding how your content is performing and how it's tied to ROI is an extremely, extremely powerful thing. Sales enablement, shockingly, given the name sales enablement, I would say 50% of the time we see marketing engaging early on to put a sales enablement solution in place versus somebody from sales. And again, that's not something that you would intuitively think, but because the system, the technology system empowers that content to be used better and to bring better analytics, it is an extremely powerful way for marketing to figure out how to take their efforts to the next level as well. So understanding that content ROI is huge. And also from that marketing perspective, identifying gaps in content. So seeing things like search data inside of a sales enablement system can help marketers understand, hey, are our salespeople looking for things or searching for things that we don't have? So let's say maybe you have one solution and you look at the data through sales enablement and see, hey, we got 150 searches for that term last month. But guess what? We didn't have any content to return because we don't have any content created. Well, that's a great indicator for your marketing team that that is a place to invest. We should create content for that topic so that we're giving salespeople what they need. So another way that you can use that data to your advantage. And then the final piece, and I think I talked about this earlier, so I won't totally rehash, but looking at the sales enablement data to inform your marketing automation campaigns. Again, so understanding, hey, if we want to promote XYZ product, let's go look and see what actually happened in the field, what customers have been presented that topic, what engagement has been there, and it really helps you just see around the corner as you're creating your marketing campaigns and taking the engagement of those campaigns to a totally new level because you're rigging the outcome. You're engaging and marketing to someone who is already ripe. They're in the funnel. They're moving down through the stages, and you know exactly how to speak to them. So that is a huge, huge benefit of looking at those data points and KPIs inside of sales enablement. So we're going to wrap up with how to take next steps. Before I do that, Paul, is there any other questions we had come in?
Yeah, just around CRM. Could you elaborate around some of the benefits of the CRM integration?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'll give you our examples with Salesforce.com. We're a partner with Salesforce, so that's mainly who we work with on this front. We also work with SAP, but so imagine this. So imagine the integration with Salesforce, where every time your sales rep had to go make a presentation or conduct a meeting, they could be presented with an absolute cornucopia of content to either help them prepare. So it could be, again, learning development, training content, battle cards, customer personas or profiles that help them prepare for their meeting. They save a massive amount of time not having to create presentations because through Salesforce, inside of Salesforce, you can actually suggest that presentation and have them open it within the CRM system. So they never even have to leave Salesforce. All of that is built into Salesforce.com. And then they can also share. So it can also recommend to that sales rep, what content should you send? When should you send it? And then all those data points are also reflected back in Salesforce.com. So because of that tight integration, you eliminate a lot of what I call a swivel chair. So switching from one system over to another system, over to another system, it's all built in together. So it allows the salesperson to have one place to go. And one thing we've actually found is that when you integrate sales enablement with CRM, it actually improves your CRM utilization rates as well, right? Because now your salespeople have a reason to go in there. They're seeing value. Hey, I want to see that email I sent to Jane Doe. I want to see that email I sent to John Smith. What engagement do they have? Now they have a reason to log into Salesforce.com. So it's a true case of a rising tide lifting all boats. If you really want to get very structured about it, we have one client, a Swiss client, which if you know anything about the Swiss, they're very calculated and calculated in how they construct their processes. But they actually have our system built into their SAP CRM, and it suggests every single activity and actually tracks how long they take to prepare, how long they take to present, how many pieces of content they followed up on. And all of those metrics roll back up to management so that they can score their salespeople. So again, that's a little bit at the extreme. I don't know that situation is right for every company, but if you're looking to build a better process or manage that process, there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what fits your business. You can make it extremely, extremely structured, or you can keep it more general. But all of those are ways that you can integrate with CRM and see a bigger outcome.
Perfect.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it for now.
Sounds good. Well, we will wrap up with just how to take next steps. So now that we've really talked about what sales enablement is, now we need to look at how do you apply that. So I'm not going to go in depth to all of these. We actually have another webinar on the topic of how to get started with sales enablement, and I will link that in the email and in the landing page that we'll send out afterward. So if you want to dive deeper into that, you can. But basically, there's 5 big points in the roadmap to a sales enablement launch. First and foremost, you have to build your team. So you have to understand who's going to lead it inside of your organization. How are you going to structure the team? Who's going to be involved from marketing? Who's going to be involved from sales? And pull that together. The next thing is setting very clear goals and requirements. So understanding what you want to achieve as an outcome, and then defining how are we going to measure that. In that same piece of the process, you also need to define what you want to see from your sales enablement technology, because you want to understand how to benchmark all the other systems against each other to understand what fits your business best. You want to define your key metrics. So how are we going to know if this worked or didn't work? How are we going to manage the process through KPI collection? You're going to want to figure out how you're going to aggregate and organize all of your content. And that really comes into play once you understand what kind of system you want to select, because they're all a little bit different. But just getting that all that content together in and of itself can be a massive task. We've seen some companies that have, thousands, if not tens of thousands of pieces of content. So that alone, pulling that into view is very important. And then finally, it's implementing a tool. And so there's lots of steps you can take to make sure that you have a successful sales enablement launch. We talk a little bit about that in that webinar that we'll link if you want to dive deeper into it. But just at a very, very high level, general overview, these are your big 5 steps that you'll need to take before you launch.
I think number 4, Dave, there, just if you go back, I think content creation organization can always be kind of a standout one for teams when they're getting started with sales enablement. I mean, as you just mentioned, there's some teams we work with who've got thousands of files, but any good sales enablement team should have, one, an integration with a repository you're using to be able to get that content out, or 2, they should have a customer success team that's able and willing to help you get that content moved over and transferred easily. So just another point on that there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part that really becomes the hardest, because the massive amount of work it takes to pull together a content library. It's not easy. And so again, we try to personally focus on customer success and navigating through that process. But that's something I would encourage you to look at. Whatever solution you're choosing, how is that organization set up to help you go through? Because that can really be a sticky point. So last slide here, just in summary. So we talked a little bit about why we need sales enablement. We talked about what sales enablement is, the big 3 pieces of it. But just to recap why it helps, the elimination of wasted time is massive. So you can see here just some statistics, saving sales reps up to 7 hours per week. If you dollarize that based on the average B2B sales rep's salary, that's over $5,000 annually. Reducing unnecessary cost around duplication of effort, or content being in multiple places, or the number of portals that you have out there for your sales team to use. If you've got a really large organization, just the wasted time of that alone could be costing you millions of dollars per year. The integrations, again, we talked about CRMs, right? And why it's so important to integrate there. So this data point is really impressive. Again, if you look at sales enablement systems as a whole, if you're integrating those with CRM, you can see up to an 80% increase on the utilization of that platform, just based on having multiple systems tied together for salespeople to have a little more simplicity in their life. Leads, we talked about generating more leads. And I would also say too, not just generating leads, but nurturing those leads, because once they're moving through that funnel and they're going from just the awareness stage to the consideration stage, now you've got this awesome, laser precise tool to help your salespeople take those leads to the next level. It's a great way to do that. And then closing deals, so 46% of sales enablement users do report a greater number of leads captured and deals closed as a direct benefit. We've seen personally with our system, upwards of 20% rise in closed deals, even in the first year of using that sales enablement system. So there's real impacts to be made. And then finally, and this is a big one, if you look at organizations that have sales enablement functions embedded inside their businesses, 75% of those organizations say that it makes at least a moderate or significant contribution to their business in terms of closed deals, higher revenue, and better management through that entire sales process. So lots of reasons to think about sales enablement. Again, it's such a glue, if I will. I mean, that's really probably the best term to use, a glue to bring together so many functions, so many resources, and make salespeople's lives much, much easier by having a way to manage the entire sales process. So as we wrap up here, any other questions, or do you guys want to have open Q&A? We're happy to hang on for a while and just chat if you'd like.
So no questions in the QA box. Just a couple of thank yous here. So thanks, Jackie, for joining.
Great. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you to everyone that took time to join today. We hope that you found some value out of this. Again, we will be sending out the on-demand link to this presentation. I'll include the slide deck as well as all those other resources we talked about linked on the landing page. And I hope that it helps you on your sales enablement journey. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Take care, everybody.